All right, guys, welcome to Beyond the Muscle. I'm really excited to welcome our next guest, Alberto Nunez. So, Alberto is a pro natural bodybuilder and 3DMJ coach. So, yeah, 3DMJ actually got me intrigued in bodybuilding way back in 2014. And yeah, I suppose they've been an integral part in putting natural bodybuilding on the map. So, yeah, it's an honor to have you here, Alberto. And yeah, welcome. How are things going?
Pretty well, man. Pretty well. I'm deloading this week, so it's you know how it goes. You
Yeah,
realize how much time you spent in the gym and
yeah.
just how achy you actually are. I
Mm,
think that's what it does, right?
yeah,
Um, so
yeah. I
pretty
want
chill
to.
week, man.
Oh, good,
Honored to
good.
to be here, man. Because like I told you off air, it's like there's fitness podcasts, and then there's like not just bodybuilding, but a very specific sector of bodybuilding, my bodybuilding. And you know how it goes, man. Like we can talk shop about this stuff like all day if they let us, right?
Yeah, yeah. No, that's well, like I said, yeah, it's an honor to have you here. And yeah, you guys really did put it on the map. Yeah, you guys, and I think it was like Matt Ogus and the likes of Lane Norton that got me intrigued back in 2013, 2014. And yeah, I think the story may be the same for a lot of actually. I think I stumbled across this photo of you. I think it's like an iconic photo of you doing like it's like most muscular and it's like a crazy separation and vascularity. And I thought to myself, how is that even possible? And then I found out that you're a natural bodybuilder. And obviously the landscape was very different back then. It was a much more of a niche thing back then than it is now. I think, yeah, because of the relative size of social media, photos like that, I think they seemed a bit more kind of impactful. Do you think they would kind of have more of an impact back then than they do now? Because obviously natural bodybuilding has grown to quite a large degree.
Um, so I guess question like I guess would that picture have made as much of a
An impact
impact
today. Yeah,
today?
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, well, it's crazy because everything just goes through people's feeds real quick. It's like, they don't realize they see something that's like, let's just say this person is like a one in a 10,000 individual, right? And they're like, oh, cool. All right,
Mm,
go to the next one. So you just constantly bombarded with these things like left and right. Like I think of pictures in natural bodybuilding that are iconic to me. There was a guy from I don't know exactly where in the UK, but Alan Davis, I
okay.
think was, and it was a back double bicep, and this was before I even competed. And I
Mm,
remember looking at that picture, and I'm like, there's no way this guy is like
mm.
natural, right? Like first thing that came to mind. I was very new at this point for sure. And it's crazy because now I look at it and I'm like, oh yeah, like absolutely. Not only that, but like conditioning was impressive, but we've come even further since then. But or the Jeff Rodriguez, there's this one with he has like these like he's with his buddy and they have like these cross striations in their triceps. It's like one that's just cemented in my head.
Mm.
But you go back to even like bodybuilding in general, there's all these pictures of like Tom Platz. It's just like,
Yeah.
or the Gaspari super vascular. And like now that stuff kind of like people just walk from one painting to the next like very quickly and they don't take the time to actually appreciate like what's taking place.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Yeah. It's like the barrier for what's impressive has been, yeah, it's so much higher now, isn't it? It's crazy. Yeah, so I'm keen to chat about like your contest prep. Are you prepping this year, Alberto? Yeah.
I would like to. Yeah,
Okay.
absolutely. Yeah.
But
Yeah.
and yeah, also like some ways in which like athletes can kind of maximize their prep. But before we do, I'd like to hear like a little bit about your backstory. So yeah, can you give us like a brief summary of where it all started for you and what got you into lifting, like generally?
I never thought I'd be doing this. Like that's for sure. My growing up, I always there was like the people who like to lift weights, and then there was like the athletes, and I was always in the camp of like, no, I'm an athlete. Like I don't need to do that. Like if anything, sometimes there's a lifting component to sports, and I would try to find a way to sneak out and not partake in that. Um, and in hindsight, I'm like, why? Right? Because I could have gotten started a lot earlier. But I think a lot of it's because it was my dad's thing. So like my dad just way better genetics than I. Like I'm such a watered down version of
Wow,
like my
really?
father. Yeah, like he's it's crazy because like he came by to stay a few months back and I remember coming down to the living room and he's wearing shorts. I'm like, those are like my legs, like, but like on another human being. Like it was
Right.
so bizarre.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, it was his thing, so I stayed away. Didn't get into it till I was 16.
Yeah.
Right away, I'm like, "Ooh, this is what I've been looking for."
Mm.
And then from there, gradual progression was like the inverse. I stopped playing other sports to do this because
Mm.
this is so cool. It's like solo, right? It's your own little experiment. It's rebellious too, in a way. Like that's the one thing. Like now it's the cool thing, but back then it was kind
Mm.
of the rebellious thing to do.
Yeah.
Um, and then eventually I'm like, okay, I need more goals. Stumbled upon like Lane Norton, and I remember watching him just broadcast his prep on the bodybuilding.com message board forums. And every week he would release pictures, 20 weeks out, 19 weeks out, eight. And I'm like, man, this is so crazy how this person has this sort of autonomy over their body. Like,
Mm.
I'm gonna look this way on this date. You just watch. I was so intrigued by that. I wanted to go through the process at least once. Um, Ended up going through the process for the first time in 2007. Like most people, it was a bots prep, but I loved it,
Yeah.
and I've been hooked ever since.
Yeah.
Since lifting since '99, but been a competitive bodybuilder since 2007.
Yeah. Oh, that's amazing. Yeah, I remember I've heard a few stories about your early preps actually and how, yeah, I guess you learned a lot of lessons. Did you respond to weight training like straight away? Were you a hyper responder, would you say?
Yeah, yeah, no, I think so. I think so. Pretty well to the point where, so actually talking to my friend about this the other day. I think like within 6 months, it wasn't the most like competitive, like or a gym filled with competitors by any means. It was in a mall,
Right,
which
right.
is weird here in the States.
Mm.
But by 6 months in, I was like bigger and stronger than like a lot of the grown men there, and that
Yeah.
feels pretty good at 16. Um, so yeah, it was a good response, but nevertheless, you get to like year two and three, and you're like, okay, now we're all like low responders.
Yeah, things definitely seem to slow down after those newbie games, don't they? Yeah, that's a really, really cool story.
Yeah.
So your decision to stay natural. So this is an interesting one because I've spoke to a few guys about this topic and had like some differing points of view. I know for myself, I was always going to pursue things naturally. A lot of that comes from the health aspect. I just wasn't really into take the risks associated with PEDs. But if I'm being honest, like, another part of me decided to stay natural because deep down, I just thought I don't have like top elite level genetics, so they're not bad. I think they're certainly above average. And I thought to myself, what is there to be gained from going down that route? Now, correct me if I'm wrong, but I seem to remember hearing on a podcast of you that it wasn't always your decision to, you were potentially going to think about going down the enhanced route and then change your mind. What was your reason for opting to stay natural?
I think initially it was just a cool thing to do. Like, um, I guess at least for me, I was brought up around the right people in that regard. Because
Yeah.
guys like Dr. Joe, like Norton, like we all kind of wanted to do that thing because they made it seem cool.
Mm,
Um, but nevertheless, there was a part of me that it's like, I want a big piece of the pie.
right.
Um, but to be honest, I think we were at a point in time back then where going enhanced, like that to me just wasn't like worth it. Like when I
Yeah.
look at the finances and what it took to actually, make a living out of it. I think
Mm,
fine. Like, for other sports, cool is if it's like, hey, this is going to get you under 10 seconds in the 100 meters because you're a
mm,
10-10 guy right now. 3 years from now, you can be running 9-7, 9-8. That makes all the sense in the world. But for this, it didn't, especially at the time, it didn't make sense. But
yeah.
I think what really sold me was I was going to get my pro card naturally and then just say that I did it so that no one could ever like talk mess on that. They're like, okay, well, he took it pretty far. Um, and then I wanted to go over to the NPC IFBB side
Mm,
because I personally thought that at the time that that was a bigger talent pool, and I wanted to challenge myself, like to see how many of these freaks I could take down. Um, but very quickly, I learned I think it's actually the inverse. Like people don't realize it. Like a lot of the folks who stay drug free, it's because they've been such hyper responders that it just never crossed their mind. Like they almost take it
mm,
for granted. Like you'll meet some guys that are just freaks of nature. Like
mm,
this prep they did keto, this prep they did low fat, high volume. They're just throwing darts in the same old general direction. And it always comes out really great. So they don't think about it because they don't need it. Whereas I think a lot of the folks on that side, there's always been a little second guessing. Not everyone. They have their freaks, like for sure, like Ron
Yeah.
Coleman, Peg Green, those guys. But we have and more than enough freaks on this side to like keep you entertained as a mere mortal. So
Mm,
so I was like, no, I got my butt kicked at my first pro show. I finished
mm.
11th out of 11th. And I'm like, what am I
Right,
doing? Like,
right,
I
right.
can't leave it like that. So, so it's been my quest ever since, man. And I think it was, especially now, man, that we're older. Like, I can't imagine, because I think 50s is like the decade. I cannot
Okay.
imagine trading in your 20s, your 50s for your 20s. Like,
Mm,
that's so weird to me. Like,
yeah,
now that I know what I know.
yeah, yeah. Oh, that's a really interesting perspective, actually. Yeah, I hadn't thought of it like that. About, yeah, I guess because there is a misconception about genetics and what can be achieved naturally. But yeah, on the other side of that, I was chatting to someone recently, and you do hear stories of people that just in the gym, general chit chat, and people who are on stuff, and you think, but they don't even look like they're on stuff. They've been lifting for maybe 6 months, and yeah, it's kind of sad to see. And yeah, I mentioned Andrew Chappelle recently about Sam Sulek
Mm.
because I think he's had a huge impact on bodybuilding and potentially natural bodybuilding too. But yeah, I think people cut him a bit too much slack personally because of just the impact and the reach that he has, and obviously yeah, he doesn't compete in tested federations, obviously. But yeah, my hunch is that he may have inspired people to go down the enhanced route. He's probably inspired a lot of people to do good things as well. But yeah, maybe it's all good. Maybe I'm just being overly critical. I don't know. Yeah.
It's a hard sell, like,
Mm,
like to tell someone that this is really going to make sense more and more every decade.
yeah.
Uh, I mean, I remember even like picking my career path, like going into college. I was like, I'm gonna be 30 when I'm done with that. Like, who cares about
Mm,
some? Like, you're
mm.
old. Life is over. It's
Yeah,
done.
yeah,
Like,
yeah,
uh,
yeah.
I'm gonna be old. Yeah, right. So I think I can see why there's just because these people want to fix the problem now, right?
Mm,
Which it's like, you're just fixing the stuff on the exterior and you're just kind of delaying this pain and things you have to figure out, right? Like bodybuilding can do a lot of great things for you, but it can also be one big distraction, right? So
mm,
I like Sam because he's very comfy in his own skin. I think
mm.
that's why people gravitate towards him. It's just Sam being Sam, and what you see is what you get. I really do believe that.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I don't think it's not going to be till like many years later that people will see that, what, it doesn't matter how big you are or who you are in this industry, it just has a way of recycling people. Like
Mm.
you tell people of like, for example, Matt Ogus, like a lot of these kids don't know who Matt Ogus is.
Yeah, true.
And that just was not the thing like
Mm.
10 years ago. And somewhere in between, Christian Guzman, like same thing.
Yeah.
A lot of people, a lot of kids now don't know who he is. So this industry just has a way of just using you, and then when we're done with you, you're no longer the trendy thing. It's like move on. So
Mm. Yeah.
I really hope it goes smoothly for Sam. Um, but if we look at the history of the fitness industry and its influencers, probably
Mm.
not.
Yeah, no, really interesting perspective. That is true. It does. Yeah, Matt Ogus, you don't really hear of him much anymore. Um, in terms of like the enhanced side, I don't really spend much time thinking about like PEDs and the enhanced side. Do you think there are things that those guys kind of get right that the natural side don't, or do you think there are things that yeah, basically, yeah. Do you think there are things they get right that we don't?
Well, yeah, I think generally speaking, people like they want to learn, but they usually want to learn from like their camps of the algorithm that's like feeding them,
Mm,
and they don't want to broaden their horizons. Like you can technically learn a little something, I think, from just about anyone. So yeah, I think we can both learn from each other a lot. I still do think that here's the issue though. It's when we're talking about these drugs. So the enhanced guys that I know that have been able to make the best use of these drugs are the ones that understand and have come to grips with the fact that you literally can grow just sitting at home
mm,
on your butt. They understand this, and this freaks them out because they're like, I better get this right because one, that's how powerful this is. The fact that by just this next like 12 or whatever week blast phase I'm going to run, I could technically grow doing nothing, right?
Mm.
It's like puberty for us. Like that was our version of it, where it's like,
Yeah.
we're all kind of the same, boys and girls, 10, 11, and then all of a
Yeah.
sudden, 3 years later, it's like you added 30 pounds of muscle without
Mm.
thinking about it, right? Didn't change anything, right? So they understand this at a fundamental level. So they really want to get all their ducks in a row to make sure they maximize the exposure time. But that's not everyone. There's a few people
Mm.
out there. And I think one of the reasons you can learn from these folks is because they get to see um, whether or not these experiments that, because that's all we're doing all the time,
Mm.
whether or not it's working. So they can catch on to trends and things a little bit faster. But again, you got to have the right sort of person. John Meadows, great example of
Mm.
this, right? Straight student of the game. He understood how powerful these drugs were, and like the guy that to this day I still learn a lot from. You know,
Mm.
so yeah, we can learn from everyone, but I think it also goes the other way around too. But there's just some things that are not applicable in the natty world to the enhanced side of things. Like, dude, you can't go PR hunting as an enhanced guy because you're just gonna wreck yourself.
Yeah.
Because you can, right? Whereas like with him, it's gonna be a little bit different. It's like pumper work might
Mm.
actually be something you need because these drugs aren't as tissue selective as we would like them to be. So it kind of makes sense, right? You might want to be playing, tempo with that 315 incline bench as opposed to like loading it up to like four plates and beyond these next few weeks. So I think, the principles are pretty much the same.
Mm.
You have to understand how the game is played, how things work. But what it looks like on the exterior is going to look very different. But nevertheless, there's a lot of things these guys do that like I'm like, yeah, because you guys have to be so on top of all the details.
Mm.
Uh, like especially when it comes to the health side of the equation, that sometimes I wish, yeah, the natty guys were just a little bit more appreciative of like all the trouble that they go through because it does make things more complicated if you're doing it right. I
Yeah.
mean, we all know guys that they're just popping whatever their friends are giving
Yeah.
them, and you know,
That's really cool. I hadn't really thought of that, but you're right. It's kind of like they're doing an experiment, but it's on fast forward, and we're playing on normal speed, and they're playing fast forward. That's really cool. Actually, I'd never really considered that. So I suppose that based on that, there are things that the Natty side can learn. One that fascinates me is Nick Walker, actually, because I remember seeing photos of him in his like early shows, and I don't know if he was
mm,
natural or not, but he didn't look like he had the structure to be like a successful bodybuilder. And now look at him, he's a freak of nature. He's huge. It's incredible. So that's an interesting one.
yeah, that's one of the things I did because we all have like if you're a bodybuilder, you kind of understand like where your range is. It's like I could mess with these guys and these guys are untouchable. There's
Mm,
nothing I can do about that, right? Um, and or you should at some point have that conversation with yourself
yeah.
because that's really what the sport is at the end. And with the enhanced side of things, it's like you could literally can skip over guys that you
Mm,
know, right? Like I could probably I'd probably take a lot of like me ruining my health, but I could probably like wreck Doug Miller,
mm,
which in the natural bodybuilding world, like without drugs, both of
mm,
us,
mm.
bro, like Doug could stop training for 5 years, like run a 6 month prep where he's dieting and building muscle at the same time and mop the floor with me. But if we keep Doug natty and I get
Mm,
to use whatever I want,
yeah.
oh yeah, so that never sat well with me,
Mm,
because I'm like I'm gonna have guys skip over me that like they shouldn't be able to skip over me, and I'm just not willing to use as much as you because you should have a mission statement I think before you go on that side like these are my hard limits.
mm.
You should absolutely. So yeah, such an interesting world with like so many shoots and ladders, man.
Mm, yeah.
It is complicated. Like we
Yeah.
don't realize that we have it easy. It's hard,
Yeah.
but it's straightforward.
That's true. It is in many ways. It's so much more simple, isn't it? Just to stay down, stay in this lane, really. Yeah, really cool perspective that. So I'd like to chat a little bit about like the different kind of people that are drawn to bodybuilding. I think obviously you've coached a lot of people. You'd have like a really like unique take on this. So I chatted to AJ earlier in the year, a couple of months back, about you actually, and how, in my opinion at least, like you don't fit the typical like bodybuilder mold. I might have lost you there. So yeah, in my opinion, bodybuilders are quite like robotic in nature, but you seem a lot more kind of intuitive in your approach to things. I remember you saying that you'd likely be like an artist if you weren't a bodybuilder. Interestingly, I'm actually an artist myself, but the kind of art I produce is what you would describe as, I think, typical for a bodybuilder. It's like really methodical, very detailed, and there's like a structure. There's a structure to it,
Mhm.
kind of similar to I think a contest prep in a way. Firstly, would you say that description of yourself is accurate? And are there is that kind of personality trait something that can have its advantages in bodybuilding?
Yeah, I'm definitely a type B sort of person, you know. Um, like for instance, my first contest prep, I didn't track a single calorie till I was like year 7 or 8,
Right,
you know.
right.
In my first prep, my idea of a prep was I'd bring just a ration of chicken to work, and half of it I'd share with like the dogs in the back, and
Mm.
so very free spirited in that sense. But at the end, I think the type A's and the type B's can kind of learn from each other, right? Because you know how it goes. It's almost like, so like when I get athletes coming to me, right away I look for the things that they're not very good at, because that's the thing that's going to move the needle the most, right? Say they're really good about the recovery, their nutrition, but they don't train very hard. It's like, okay, we're going to go for that string right there. um so the same thing, I think, when analyzing yourself, like who you are, like just who you are is who you're going to be in bodybuilding and everything else. And I think it's a fun environment, a fun game to play,
Mm.
where through this little simulation thing we have here,
Mm.
you get to kind of see what you're prone to, um, try to correct for those things, and you can use those things that you learn about yourself and apply them to like the real world. So for me, very free spirited, very intuitive, you could say, but at the
Mm.
same time, through bodybuilding, I've learned the importance of having systems. It's like, I don't care how smart you think you are, at some
Mm.
point, you need systems, because, yeah, you're going to get in your own way and forget things. So
Mm.
for me, as someone who's type B, I've had to borrow a lot from the people who are more type A. And now, yes, I do what I do, but I do have this these systems in place to kind of just keep me like, from
Yeah,
going out way too far into the woods.
yeah. Now that makes sense. I suppose it does have its advantages because it's you're less prone to being like really neurotic, I guess, if things have to change. I guess that's probably a big one. Whereas some people like love structure and love routine and love things being like a set way. Do you find like changing your plans and that, be it like missing a workout or not necessarily missing, but pushing a workout back a day, things like that? Do you find those quite easy to deal with?
Yeah, I do.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Mm.
Yeah, just the whole being dynamic thing, especially once again, you understand the big picture rules.
Yeah.
Um, and I think at the end, it saves my butt more than it gets in my own way. But at the same time, I'm also like, my goal is not to get everyone where I'm at, because
Mm.
that might not fit most people. Like my first pro show I won, I didn't even pack anything. I just got
Right,
on my
right,
car, drove a few states. I'm like, as long as there's gas stations in the way, I'll be able to make this work.
mm.
And I just want to have a nice. I felt that at that point, what I needed was a nice, relaxing drive, because I love to drive,
Yeah,
and weekend, and I ended up looking amazing.
right.
Um, so yeah, I guess I'm just very in tune with like myself, what I'm feeling, that sort of deal. But at the same time, I understand like the hard, principles of like human physiology. So
Yeah,
that's again, that's always like set in place.
yeah, interesting. Yeah, that makes sense. Do you find like out of the guys like you coach, the guys and girls that most fall into the type A camp, or are there a lot of people like yourself as well?
No, they're mostly very type A. That's
Yeah,
that's
yeah,
usually what I get.
yeah.
Um, Yeah, that's usually what I get, and I'd say the ones that aren't, they just tend not to be very good at bodybuilding, right?
Right,
Or
interesting.
or they are, but they genetics kind of like allow them to get away with it. But usually, it's the type A's that thrive in this environment, I feel.
Yeah, interesting. That's I mean Dirk seems quite relaxed and chilled in his nature, to be fair. Maybe he's yeah, got a bit of both. I don't know.
No, he does. He does. He does
Mm,
a lot of little things that um I I try to instill in my other athletes. It's like he might seem like a free spirit, but at the
mm,
same time, he does all these little things that if you were to do right now, they'd probably overwhelm you and you'd feel like you'd be very constrained, like in some sort of bodybuilding jail.
yeah,
Um, so yeah, he's still little things like going to bed at the same time and
yeah.
eating a well balanced diet and the meditating, all he does a bunch
Hmm.
of things that are big ask for a lot of people, but to
Mm,
him, now he'll do them with a smile on his face. But at the same time, he's also very uh, okay with adjustments and changes along the way. I think something that's very important as things get more dynamic, like towards the end of the prep, certainly during peak week. Like for some people, you start with this peak week and it looks totally different by the end of the week. Like
mm,
something's wrong. And it's like, no, 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 we're doing this so that something isn't wrong. Right.
yeah.
So yeah, Dirk is a great mixture of both though.
Yeah, well, that's interesting. That makes sense. Yeah, I spoke to Andrew like Chappelle about this a couple of weeks back, and yeah, he's done like some research in like personality traits and bodybuilding, and I love the way he framed it. He kind of in terms of like the big five personality traits, and then having
Mm-hmm.
like kind of internal versus external locus of control. And yeah, spent like a bit of time thinking about this. I'm definitely someone who I think would score like highly in conscientiousness, low in
Mm-hmm.
kind of trying new things, probably slightly introverted by nature, and a bit neurotic. And there's another one, forgotten that one, but there's another one. Are there any kind of unifying traits that you think a lot of the top guys share when it comes to just personality types?
Man, I think above all, like they just really love this,
Mm,
right? Like um they can't see their life without it, essentially, right? It's a big part of their purpose. So I think that matters a little bit less, right? It's like, we're both parents. It's like you see good parents that they're kind of all over the place when it comes to those like five traits, the ocean
mm,
traits, right? But they're so invested into their kids, like they really love their kids, and when they need to be open, right, and be like, all right, I guess we are going to, I don't know, like have you play that sport or take you to that daycare because it's the best thing for you. So I think if it's all like really rooted in just love for
mm,
this, for the process, for the results, you will make yourself as into whatever you need to be to get the job done.
mm.
But it needs to start with that. You need to be enthusiastic about the work, right? Like
Yeah.
for us, I mean, I don't know about you, but sometimes I train on vacation, like even if it's
Mm,
just 30 minutes. And
yeah.
it's like, I need to. It's like my little fix. And then after this, I'm gonna be such a good person the rest of the day, right?
Yeah, yeah. Oh,
Uh,
yeah.
right.
Yeah. Can
Um,
definitely relate to that. Yeah. I don't quite feel myself if I haven't trained. Yeah, 100%.
so yeah, I mean, you might see some similarities between people.
Mm,
Like a lot of this keeps showing up, like the neuroticism,
mm,
probably being introverted, right? Because it's not a team sport, but
mm.
at the end, I think that's the best part about being backstage with bodybuilders at big shows is that everyone here absolutely loves it and
Mm.
understands what it is that you're doing.
That's true. Yeah, such an important point to be fair. And that's one that I probably even skipped over, but yeah, it's yeah, we all love this, don't we? And that yeah, that's the one unifying trait, I guess. We all love bodybuilding, but yeah, that's cool. What areas do you feel athletes like place a bit too much emphasis on in a contest prep?
Um, Too much. I'd say probably viewing it as something that is very contrasting to the off season. So I do think as time goes on, there should be less and less contrast
Mm.
between both. So that means that, hey, maybe being a little bit more strict in the off season, like, right, like maybe you don't just worry about your sleep when you're, 6 weeks out. Like maybe this is something you should do during most of your off season,
Mm.
or maybe you shouldn't be, 45 pounds over stage weight in the off
Mm.
season. Maybe somewhere in the middle might be nice, right? But it also works the other way around too. Like when you are prepping, it's like, hey, as time goes on, like start looking for where you can fit in a certain level of flexibility.
Mm.
Um, I do think that's huge, or things that you wouldn't necessarily be okay with doing, such as a date night with your spouse,
Mm.
right? Uh, Being able to disconnect from the prep and like don't let go of your other hobbies. If you like building
Mm.
train sets or whatever, it's like when you're doing your train set thing, it's like do your train set thing. So yeah, I think less contrast between both the tasks is the ultimate goal, because each phase, like, well, you can, in the off season, you can learn a lot from your prep. Don't forget the stuff you learn, and then like
Mm.
vice versa as well.
Yeah, no, that makes a ton of sense. On the flip side of that, do you think there are any areas that people tend to overlook a little bit too much in a contest prep?
Um, yeah, I'd say a big one is well, one of the specific traits of a physique athlete, a bodybuilder, is it's the conditioning element, right?
Mm.
So like you need to be mindful about how far away from that you get. Like, you should always have a radar when it comes to that. And um, I mean, it's just something that it's a combination of things. I think one is you need to have um, the right habits in place and like really enjoy the ins and outs of this lifestyle for you to be tighter year round.
Mm.
Um, and then also just you kind of have to be okay with the fact that your progress isn't going to come as efficiently. But
Mm.
it's not because you're not gaining muscle. It's just that now the progress is one for one or closer to that, to the like contractile tissue you are building, right? So, for example, I could gain 10 pounds from here and all my presses are going to shoot up. Is it because I
Mm.
build up muscle? No, it's just, there's a physics equation that'll explain to you why that is. So, I think that's the big one. Is just like it would make no sense if a power lifter was getting really good at their 10 rep maxes. And it's like, all right, well, that's cool. You're obviously stronger, but the specificity of your sport is like, what can you do? And just actually not even a rep range. And like with your one reps,
Mm.
same thing with us. It's kind of like, hey. It's like, yeah, that's great. You're making progress. You're in your off season. You're taking enough time away from the stage, but you need to be mindful about how far away you are from that stage weight. So I think the big one, I mean, we all learned this the first time we prep, because one of the reasons we tell our friends who want to get into fitness, but they don't want to lift weights just yet. They want to lose the weight first. It's like, no, you don't get this like muscle contours fat like you wouldn't believe, like
Mm.
makeup for body fat. Uh, you don't realize this until you prep for your first time that, oh shoot, just because I had abs,
Mm.
at this body weight, it means absolutely nothing when we're talking about contest shape. So I think just being mindful about how far away you have to start, what body weight you're starting at, I think is a huge key for natural bodybuilders.
Such a good point. Yeah. And you're someone who tends to stay fairly close to stage weight as well. Would you say that's mainly down to your level of experience and because you've accrued most of the muscle you're going to? Is that the main reason why?
Well, I think it kind of makes sense to, yes, like get tighter, especially as your potential to gain diminishes over the
Mm.
years.
Yeah.
But even the people who, I don't know, like if I were to gain 3 pounds on my stage weight over the next decade,
Mm.
wow, that's
Mhm.
insane. That
Yeah.
is insane. Like, well, what did you do, Bert? Like that,
Mm.
like you got some secret there.
Yeah.
That's like best case scenario. But even the guys that maybe they are in a position where they can gain 7, 8, like in the next 5 years, this is immense, and this is physique changing, like
Mhm.
100%. Like, do you need? Like, are you running a profitable business if you gain 50 pounds to gain 7 or 8.
Mm,
Like it does. Could you have done that gaining 15 is the
yeah.
question I bring up. Um, so I wouldn't say, and this is something that I have been thinking about a lot lately. I don't know if bulking is like dead per se, because I do think there is a time and a place for it. And by this I just mean newer lifters that need to see more explicit progress, like when they're
Yeah.
training, right? Like for you and I want to know about you, but like for me, like if on my dumbbell chest press over the course of a 12-week block, maybe the weight stayed the same, but through
Mm,
4 sets, I added 5 reps. I'm
mm.
like,
Yes.
great,
So
right?
weird.
But and that's part of it, my training age, part of it because in this case, I'm not trying to gain weight along with it, you could
Yeah.
say, right? Whereas, with younger folks, they just need to see, like, they need to feel strong. They need to see the
Mm,
weights going up. And even though, yes, some of it is going to be contractile tissue, again, a lot of it is going to be uh, just, again, a physics equation. It's why you take, I don't know, are you familiar with the powerlifter Russ Orhey?
no, I'm not
Um,
actually. No, no.
he'd be amazing bodybuilder when he's done. But
Okay.
this cat, super strong, super strong. But like, if you were to put him drug free too, if you were to put him like one weight class higher, he wouldn't be nearly as strong.
Right.
Like he'd go from like that's the guy to beat to like let me break top five with these guys just by going
Right.
up one weight class, right? So yes, like I think this has kind of been the flavor of the week in natural bodybuilding, on just in
Mm,
the evidence based side of things, which goes back to the whole point that I'll learn from an enhanced guy. I'll learn from a pencil neck dude. Like I don't care. I want to be corrected. Like that's you need
mm,
to have some sort of enthusiasm when it comes to like being corrected, right? Because most people don't, or at least not from everyone. But
mm,
I do think what makes the most sense from a gaining perspective is to perhaps find a comfy body weight and kind of just this is what I believe as of 2025, and just kind of sit there and recomp it,
mm.
right?
Yeah.
And a lot of the elites have been doing, like David Kay does that. Like
Mm,
he'll tell you, right? I don't want to put words in the man's mouth, but I think he says something like 10, 12 pounds over stage
yeah.
weight,
Yeah.
right? He's got a lower set point, right?
Mm,
Like for someone else of his muscularity, it might have to be 15, 17, 20, 22, whatever. But he just sits there and he improves.
mm. Yeah.
And I think that is just a very valid option for people who may not be very pro wanting to see themselves get fat. I think like with
Mm,
women, this is harder. Like with
yeah.
men, they're like, yeah, I'll bench 315 if I'm sloppy. Hard to sell that to women. But I think for competitive natural bodybuilders, it's an alternative option that people just don't look at enough.
Yeah, that's really interesting. Yeah. Yeah. There's a lot to think about there. I do wonder if I need to to rethink how heavy I get. Typically I think I'm somewhere in between yourself and then someone who would go maybe a bit overboard. I tend to hover, yeah, maybe 13, 14 kilos above stage weight at my absolute
Yeah.
peak, like peak bulking. Um, but yeah, then it's surprising. I'm always surprised at how light I get when I'm down to like stage lean. That's the thing, and I guess a lot of people don't realize how light you're going to be if you're truly, yeah, truly stage lean. Yeah, it's crazy.
Yeah, and again, you have to reset your PRs. Like that's the big thing,
Mm,
right? Like I have PRs that is for this weight
mm,
class, my own personal weight class, and then for
yeah.
this weight class. So you just kind of have to do that. But I will say this, I think as you learn a smaller body, because a lot of it is just like timing and
Mm,
proprioception, eventually you find yourself like just as strong as you were at the higher weights. Because
mm,
it's crazy, right? Like just like for me, like on a press, it's just like when my forearms hit my bicep,
mm,
like that can throw things off, right? Like
right.
like you understand that,
Mm,
but once you learn the smaller body, like it's like all of a sudden you're like, man, I was carrying all this like extra dead weight. But I guess the where this baffles people, where I lose people, is in the you need a surplus to put on muscle, right? But I think what we're looking for here is a body weight where you are what I like to call metabolically flexible. took this term from Eric Helms many years ago, and he hasn't used it since. So
Okay.
I would say this is what I like to call it, but
Yeah.
Eric said it first. And what metabolically flexible means is just that you have an easier time switching from endogenous to exogenous energy sources, right? When you are 2 kilos away from stage weight and your lunch is at noon and you haven't eaten and it's 2 p.m., boy, do you feel it. Your
Mm.
body doesn't want to pull from endogenous energy sources, right? But when you are at a comfy body weight, that happens. You're okay. So I think that's the first big clue is like how dependent are you on exogenous fuel from an energy and mood standpoint? That'll kind of clue you in regards to like where that is. And here's the thing: if your body has an easy time powering what is essential bodily functions, like in between meals, even when they stray a little bit further, it probably has enough to put on the. It probably has no issue putting on those 6 grams of lean tissue that you were due to put on today.
Mm.
Um, and I guess the next question would be like, well, do you ever see this in practice, right? Because it's one thing to connect the dots and talk about things at a mechanistic level, but is it really happening? Go look at the elite world class powerlifters.
Mm.
I really wish like we can learn a lot. Like speaking of bodybuilders that won't learn from like enhanced guys or enhanced guys that won't learn from us. If you look at those folks, like to this day, like the most muscular pecs, hamstrings, and glutes that I've seen it's not on drug-free natural bodybuilders. It's like in the back of like our big national level powerlifting meets here. But
Mm.
these guys usually just hover at a body weight for as many years as they can because they don't
Yeah.
want to go up to the next class. And you just see them over the years. You're just like, man, you're just filling that out more and more. You're running out of
Mm.
time. You're like about to compete at single digits if you're not careful at
Mm.
powerlifting.
Yeah.
So there's a whole large pool to extract from. And again, these are people who aren't necessarily using S tier movements for um, building muscle,
Yeah.
but they are progressing because that's the name of their game. They're eating a high protein diet, and you just see it there. So I think for most bodybuilders, if you're serious, once you've gotten to that point where this lifestyle is second nature, is like find that comfy fighting weight and
Mm.
then just try to make it look better over time.
Mm. Really interesting. Yeah, that's not a perspective I'd really considered. I guess if I had in my head that if things were stagnant for a bit too long, even if weights were going up in the gym, I thought, how am I putting a muscle? How am I putting a muscle if my weight is stable? But yeah, I guess you have to look at the look as well, and that's got to be another metric. Yeah, so true.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Again, it's weird because we've always done it this way. And
Mm.
again, there's a reason to put on weight. Like if you just have like some lifting PRs, and you know that there's no way I'm going to squat, I don't know, 250 kilos at at 80 kilos.
Mm.
Uh, Go ahead, get to 95, have fun with it. That's the
Yeah.
only reason I would probably ever really try to gain weight purposely is if I had some weird PR, and I think that's
Right.
justifiable. I think that's a fun adventure. Like
Yeah.
do it if you want to, but for bodybuilding purposes, no, not really.
Mm.
I don't. Yeah, I think just finding the sweet spot and chilling there, and just tends to also create less contrast between like off season and on season in terms of behaviors.
That's true.
Um,
Yeah.
yeah. So
Yeah. Yeah, great point. That makes a ton of sense. On the topic of kind of training into your late 30s and 40s, you're 40, are you 40 or 41?
42 as
42.
of
Okay.
yeah, a few
Wow,
weeks ago.
okay.
Yeah, yeah.
Oh wow, happy belated birthday. On that topic, so something I'd be curious to your thoughts about. I spoke to Ben Lloyd recently, who I prepped him in 2016 for his first season, and whilst his physique then was really impressive, it's really remarkable to see how much progress he's made like since his first season in 2016. He's added muscle in seemingly in what seems like every single area. And yeah, I think it was Steve Hall who describes like natural bodybuilding as like watching paint dry, which I 100% agree with. How has progress been for you in the last I don't know, maybe 5 or so years? And can you pinpoint areas in which you look at your body now and think, yeah, it's clearly vastly different, or not vastly, but clearly improved to how it was like
Mhm.
5, 10 years ago?
Yeah, I think at this rate, the way the 40s are going, they look to exceed my 30s for sure, which is a little weird. I don't know about my 20s because I built a lot of my base from 20 to 23. So,
Yeah.
but on a relative scale, they look like they're going to be better. And I think a lot of this is just it goes back to I guess you have like two elevators in life. You have your physical and you have your mental elevator. And right as time goes on, the physical goes down, but the mental goes up.
Mm,
So like the average of what floor you're on um, can overall increase, especially if you really like learn to just understand who you are, understand what you're prone to, kind of leave that ego at the door a little bit. So like I think a big one for me, like in my 40s, is I started to realize that I've always done my best work when I've had some form of like mentors there. And whether formal or informal, like you just you need to constantly as you progress in this kind of like monkey branch from mentor to mentor. My first mentor was technically the free one that came with like my gym membership. You know, they
mm.
just had these teenage boys there that were, just helping people out for free with their clipboard. And remember my man Otto, I still remember him to this day, biggest, most jacked dude there. I'm like, you gonna help me out, bro. And okay, now I know way more than dude. We still talk, by the way.
Yeah,
And I'm more jacked than him, but he was pretty jacked in
right.
retrospect. But like that's one thing that I think somewhere in the middle, I'm like, I don't necessarily need those, or if I do need mentors, they need to belong to a very specific camp, mesh
Yeah.
with my camp or it would be of my lineage. And like now it's like, no, I'm just kind of open to not just learning from different camps in the bodybuilding world, whether it's the pencil necks, whether it's the enhanced bros, but beyond that, like just look at like other worlds and through other hobbies and interests, because at the end it's all humans playing with like sticks and rocks,
Mm,
basically, right?
yeah.
Um, so right now, 40 look to be good. I've seen a lot of great transformations. Athletes that have come to me in their 40s and they're like, I think I'm just done. I'm just here so that you can help me decay as slow as possible. And um, but oddly enough, the ones that seem to get the most out of their 40s are the ones that like the being good for my age just wasn't an option. Like whether when they were younger and it's like, hey, I'm pretty good for a 14-year-old, right? It's like,
Right.
no, they just wanted to be good, right? And then the same thing, when they're 45, they don't want good for a 45. They just want to be good. My athlete who passed away recently, Craig Toth, he actually made one of the zaniest transformations from age 40 to age 52. And
Right.
actually, the biggest spurt we made was after he went through some health issues, ended up having to have a leg amputated, and like nearly died.
Wow.
Like quite the story, worth looking up. Um, but this man, like immediately after that, what we did in the year and a half, I'm just like, this makes like no sense. You were already a freak to
Mm.
begin with like these 20-inch arms.
Right.
So I think, I think you go through something like that, it just really changes your perspective on
Mm.
everything. It's like whatever moment I'm in, I'm in. Uh, but he also never had the whole like, I just want to be good for my age,
Right.
I want to look for excuses. Sure, you kind of keep that there, right? It's like, hey, I'm not 25. I shouldn't be doing like, skull crushers with like all, right? Like, we're easier to hurt at this point. But he still believed in the fact that, hey, like I'm gonna be optimistic about how much I can progress from this point. So yeah, I think 40s are magical because again, that's where your elevators are kind of balanced. Whatever you might have
Mm.
lost on the physical, like the mental one is shot up a little.
Yeah. Such a good perspective and an amazing story as well. And it makes me think of like Jeff Alberts actually, because yeah, he's someone who you look at him and you don't think he's good for 53. You think he looks incredible anyway. And
Mm-hmm.
yeah, that's so true. Really, I hadn't considered that. Yeah. And I hope that I can progress into my 40s and 50s as well, because I feel like I have yeah, I'm starting again. I'm starting again, but as an older man, and I'm happy to see where see where it takes me. Do you think like going back to like comparing like old like versus new you? Do you think there's any truth like the idea of like muscle maturity or like kind of grainy muscle? Do you think that's a bit of a myth?
Well, I think for sure skin plays a big factor in that.
Mm.
Like one thing I've noticed is it as if I've gotten older, like what I look like in those transitional body fat like phases. Like I mean, like I'm not lean, I'm not fat either. It's not as impressive because the skin isn't just as like tight,
Right.
right? Like it's just not holding things like where they used to, be held up to. But on the other side, once I trim down, it's like, whoa, like it looks like you literally just have skin draped over muscle.
Mm.
Um, so I've noticed that maybe the last like 4 or 5 years. Um, so I think that's a big part of it is just like
Okay.
the changes in skin. But I'd imagine at a certain point, I guess the way I kind of describe muscle growth to an extent is, you see those old pictures of like here it's like Manhattan Island, like New York, right? And you see it like in 1900, and then this is in the 1950, and then this is in 2024. It's like the same surface area,
Mm.
but it just looks so much more dense and packed.
Mm.
Because at a certain point, like measurements for a natural bodybuilder, like you literally can probably look at the insertion points and the origins and like what that looks like on a I don't know on a pec or something, and you can kind of guesstimate like how much muscle they can actually like put on, how much more space that can grow like beyond its baseline. But in regards to just that more dense and packed look, um, I do think that's precisely what changes over time.
Yeah.
Um, and probably I think as time goes on, you just acquire more vascularity
Mm.
as well. But like every square inch seems to matter more. Again, along with the aging skin, you just you look better as long as you're not 14% body fat, it seems.
Mm. Interesting. Yeah, I love that description of the how densely packed things are. I hadn't really considered that. Um, that's really cool. Like we're kind of getting to the end of this. I'm very aware of your time, Alberto, but this has been so insightful already. I quickly want to touch on your training before we do like some quick fire stuff at the end.
Yeah, yeah.
Are you still training 3 days a week?
So I did when why did I do this? Oh yeah, I did it because post show, I think it's almost a wrong thing for athletes to do to like just like let me get back to getting better.
Right.
Like you like it's very hard to overtrain in a classical sense through bodybuilding because that's a systematic thing. Like people don't understand how easy our work can be. Go speak to an endurance athlete, a high level one, the stuff they have to put up with different level. It does not even compare. But a lot of those symptoms we kind of get to start grazing upon. Like when you look at like what is by definition overtraining, um, not overreaching, overtraining. And that's what a contest prep does because systematically you're screwed. Right? It's
Mm.
hormones, libido, mood, sleep, energy, everything's dysregulated, right? So to like throw in another big to do from your to your body like post show, I thought that was the athletes let me intervene on that and
Yeah.
like have them take a cruisy period. We'll do that, but it's hard to get people to do that because post show, all they want to do is get better. So started with 3 days a week. I'm like, I'm just gonna train 3 days a week, and I'm gonna do this for like 2 months. And I was getting great results. I think part of it because um, my resources weren't spread as thin as previous, or because I was training 3 days a week. Just, I guess it was appropriate given where my body was in part of the recovery period and what it could actually adapt to, not to be confused with what I was willing and wanting to do.
Yeah.
So we dosed that right. It kept working, and I'm like, I'm just going to ride this thing until the wheels fall off, essentially.
Right.
So I did it for a good 6, 7 months, and the only reason I stopped is because uh, yeah, I started a training group online and I
Right.
wanted to run the first block with him. But with 3 days a week, I was having a fantastic time. Like I always felt ready to do something, always felt motivated. Um, and I would not be surprised if I go back to that at some point, like mid prep.
Okay. Yeah, interesting. Yeah, 'cause it's interesting because I can't imagine training only 3 days a week, but I guess if you're so efficient, yeah, you can just get the job done, and it makes sense doing it in a post show period, 100%. Um, well, this has been so much fun, Alberto. I've really enjoyed this. I could pick your brain and chat bodybuilding with you for hours, but I'm aware of your time here. So we're going to do some quick fire non-bodybuilding related questions
Oh,
quickly. So what's your favorite film?
ooh, man. So, um, I'm not a very good movie watcher.
Okay.
Um, I'm not, but let's see. I am, but at the same time, like nothing really sticks.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, I love foreign films just because they have a different vibe and feel to your own culture. Like I explored a lot of so I could work on my Spanish, like a lot of like Southern American ones, some Spanish films. The vibe is always different.
Mm,
Um, I want to do some Bollywood things just because I imagine that okay, maybe their stuff would have a different vibe too. So
mm.
I like foreign stuff. If I had to pick one, I think that would just reason like with the audience would be like, yeah, that's it. I think what was it, Warrior? I think where he had to break his brother's arm. It was an MMA.
It's Tom
Uh,
Hardy, right? Is that the one?
yeah,
Mm. Yeah, I've
yeah,
seen that. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. That one, I was like, ooh, like that's. I like things that kind of don't necessarily end with a clear cut happy ending because
Mm.
after all, like that is life, right? Nothing
Yeah,
really ever
yeah.
gets resolved. So, yeah, I
That's
like
cool.
things that kind of like when you're done with it, you kind of feel ick, like
Mm.
that's not what I wanted. That's what I like.
Cool, yeah, a really cool answer. Yeah, it reminds me of the first Rocky film. I used to be a massive Rocky fan. I think that was a big part of why I got into bodybuilding. And yeah, obviously the first one, spoiler, he didn't win, but yeah,
Yeah.
like, yeah, same kind of vibe there, I guess.
Yeah, you're such a boy, man. Because I was never into those, like growing up. Even
Really?
though I kind of grew up in the same era,
Mm.
where like the action movies were, I guess, at their peak. Like I was never
Mm.
really into the Arnold
Really?
or I was into weird stuff, man. Yeah,
Yeah.
or the yeah the Rocky for sure. Rambo was out
Mm.
there. Uh, yeah,
Yeah.
weird kid, man. Like in
Yeah.
hindsight, I'm like, man, I missed out because I could have been vibing with all my little friends about like the Rambo and stuff. Right
Yeah,
now,
yeah.
I like it. Yeah.
Yeah, that's cool. Yeah, that's fine. No, no, cool, cool answer. I love that. What's your favorite food when dieting?
Ooh. So serious dieting.
Mm.
Mm, I like, and I try to find a way to make this fit. So um, I'm not a sweet person. Like post show, I think one of my favorite parts is if for 2 weeks I can enjoy a slice of cake because otherwise I I can't. It's like you have to catch me on the right day, and it's just like it's overwhelming. It's like
Mm.
too much zing, the
Yeah.
sweet stuff. But 2 weeks post show, me and my wife, we can like share cakes, and that's nice. So, and then it goes, and then I go back to like straight like boy palate, and I don't care about carbs or
Mm.
sweet ones. But I love me like a very fatty, well marbled piece of steak, and I'll have one on my last low calorie day
Mm.
of the week before I start my refeed cycle, both usually it's Saturday, Sunday. Sometimes I'll stretch it till Monday, but for
Mm.
sure as a reward for getting through all those low days on
Yeah.
Friday, what I'll do is it's so backwards, right? Because I'll like bodybuilders, it's like sometimes they'll pick that chicken breast because that looks like less well marbled, right?
Right, yeah.
But I'm looking for the most frosty steak, and I'm like, usually it's
Mm.
skirt. I like skirt, so underrated.
Right, right.
Um, and yeah, honestly, like after I have like animal fat, I
Mm.
just feel like so many things reset in
Wow,
my
okay.
brain. Yeah. Like I almost don't want to take the high days. I'm like, no, I am good. Like this 10 ouncer, like I'm good. But like, of course I take them because I know I need them. But
Mm.
just very calming, like fatty animal products, I think, when you're dieting. And this
Mm.
makes sense. Like I couldn't tell you exactly why. And maybe I'm just making things up, but from an evolutionary standpoint, it's like they call us like hunter gatherers. It's
Mm.
the other way around. We were gatherer hunters because hunting is really freaking hard,
Yeah.
right? It hardly ever does it land in success. So there's something calming after not eating
Mm.
for the or enough for extended periods of time to have like fatty animal flesh.
Yeah.
It's just I think I've done it with a lot of my athletes, and especially the men really seem to have this like all is good feel. So
Really
yeah,
interesting. That
fatty
feeling
meat,
you
man.
get, is that do you only get that when you're at like low levels of body fat, or let's say you're in like you're 10 to 12 above stage weight, would you still get that same kind of feeling?
No, because right now it's like if a cheat day to me sounds like what would be great
Yeah.
would be like, can I not eat until dinner on a Sunday?
Right, right. Yeah.
Like, and just be productive.
Yeah.
So that's where I'm at. But and honestly, I don't really start to feel dieted until like I'm maybe 5 pounds away from stage weight, maybe
Wow, okay.
3. I think that's something people give way too much credit for, is like the Ozempic folks, like the people who are going to those GLP-1s. It's like I get you, because I am that way with, I don't know if you've noticed this, but with attention span. Like I
Yeah.
would have been diagnosed as a kid and medicated. Obviously, I have coping strategies now, but I get it, because this bit world's way too busy
Mm,
for me, right? And the same thing with food and other people. And I just tend to be on this very low end of the scale
mm.
where, like, I'm good at dying, but not dying.
Right.
Like I don't feel a contest prep, I think, like how most people feel. And I've told
Mm,
Steve Hall this before. It's kind of like you take an elite 400-meter sprinter. Yeah, look, he's hurting, but I guarantee you it's not a hurt like you and I feel it. It's
mm.
totally different. So I think sometimes, um, yeah, I like to sit here and be like, I'm just tougher than all y'all, but that's not the case.
Yeah. It's genetic.
Yeah, it's a genetic thing.
Yeah,
So
it's yeah.
so yeah, I don't really enjoy like the steak or even kind of care about food until like literally I have glute striations, but they were the kind that were good in 2010.
Right, right. Yeah, no, I get what you're saying. That's funny actually, yeah, because with me, anywhere 15 pounds above stage weight, and I really start to feel the effects of having low body fat. And I'm not someone who is kind of, yeah, I stay fairly lean. I'm a quite a
Yeah,
lean
yeah,
guy
yeah.
generally. But yeah, any 7 kilos above stage weight, and that's where I know that, yeah, things are going to start to get progressively worse for me. But yeah, damn, I need some of those genetics that you've got in terms of that. But
No, no, for me it's like any like man, anything north of like 4 kilos, I just like I'm done. It's like, can I just lose weight? Yeah.
right, right. Yeah, well, that's interesting. Yeah, so what's your favorite off-season food? I guess, yeah, I'll be curious.
So yeah, for sure. If I could afford to fast for a day, that would be nice. Like
Yeah.
there's days where I'm like, you're just procrastinating right now, and you're just gonna make it worse. So you just better go in that kitchen and then make yourself something.
Mm,
Right. So, but I think off season, man, I really like I guess foods that are small in amount but very like powerful in like taste and sensation.
mm,
So give me a fancy cheese and some crackers.
yeah.
Same. I love those during prep too, just because they're very overwhelming. They demand all your attention, right? Like you
Mm,
have to be very present to really absorb and take that in. So I like it both. See, both times of the year. I love cheese. Those fancy schmancy cheeses when I'm prepping, but especially right now, there's something nice that I can snack on that I I don't have to eat a whole lot to like just feel like it's tickled my senses.
yeah. Oh, cool answer. Yeah, quite different. Have you tried any kind of French cheeses at all?
No, I'm honestly, I am so new to this area.
Oh,
I'm
okay.
such a poser that I just literally go into the upscale supermarket and I look
Mm,
for something that's reasonably expensive, and
right.
I'm like,
Yeah.
this has got to be
It's
good,
gotta be good. Yeah.
and I just go with that.
Yeah, yeah. That makes sense. Yeah, they do the best cheese over in France, but it's a long way for you to travel. So yeah. What are your hobbies outside of bodybuilding?
Ooh, um, so I like to read. Reading is a big one for me. I think that was probably the hardest part. Um, when I just had my first child, well, not I, my wife had it on our behalf, and it's been about a year, but there was a good like 6 month streak there where I couldn't keep up with my reading the way I want to,
Mm,
and I just feel like it's like like physique stuff. You just feel like you're getting slower, like you are detraining, like you're just losing this knowledge.
mm,
It just felt nasty to be like just feel mentally out of shape. So
mm.
I like reading. I like spending time with my daughter, with my wife, and oh man, yeah, yeah. I think that's the brunt of it, especially these days. But if I can sneak in at least 20 pages a day
Mhm.
of some book, like I'm a happy camper, because it's crazy. You look into other worlds; they might have nothing to do with you.
Mm.
could have been a story about some sailors lost at sea. You're like,
Mm.
I'm gonna take that back, and me and my athletes are gonna like learn from this, right? So
Mm.
yeah, yeah, I like that. Oh, and sports. I love sports. I love
Yeah.
NBA basketball.
Okay.
NBA
Yeah. Yeah.
basketball is uh is my current like main time waster.
Yeah, cool. Yeah, great answers. Yeah, I love reading as well. I don't do as much I used to. I used to be obsessed with it, but I need to do more. There's nothing like a good book. It really is amazing.
Nothing.
And,
It's insane. Yeah, yeah.
yeah. But look, this has been amazing, Alberto. I really appreciate you taking the time to come and chat with me. And yeah, I wish you all the best for your future shows, and I hope to get you on again sometime. This has been a lot of fun. And yeah, thank you guys for watching and for tuning in, and we'll see you next time.